Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gordon's Grammar Cats. My name is Gordon Misko. This is the lecture series where my cats help me to generate sentences that we diagram using phrase structure rules associated with the generative grammar tradition. The phrase structure rules that we will use throughout this series are from the third edition of the Grammar Book by Diane Larson Freeman and Marion Salsa Murcia. You can see a reference to that here at the bottom of the screen. So in the previous video, we drew grammar trees for the first two of the 7 basic English sentence patterns shown here. And in this video, we will continue by diagramming the next 3 of these patterns. These are SVO, SVOO, and SVOC. So the first sentence pattern that we will diagram, the SVO pattern, is probably the most well-known of all English sentence patterns. And like the previous video, we will illustrate it here using a sentence inspired by my cats, Hamish and Ruby. As you can see, Hamish was just sitting in his box, minding his own business, when Ruby came and sprawled out on top of him. Like other cats, they both very much like to squeeze themselves into boxes, so we will use the simple sentence, "They love boxes," to illustrate the SVO pattern. And like the examples in the previous video, we start diagramming our sentence with the subject and predicate of the sentence. Expanding the NP of the subject, we have the pronoun they. And turning to the predicate, we have the obligatory constituents, which are the auxiliary and a verb phrase. And in the auxiliary, we keep our verb tense, which in this case is present. The verb phrase is made up simply of the verb love, which we will attach to the auxiliary tense marker. And then the noun phrase, which forms part of the verb phrase, is comprised of the noun box, and its plural is also indicated here with the PL notation. And so there we have it, our SVO sentence pattern. Note here that we generate the noun phrase directly from the verb phrase rather than from, say, the predicate. That's because the SVO structure, in the SVO structure, the noun is necessary to complete the verb argument. Therefore, the SVO pattern requires a special class of verbs called transitive verbs. And that simply means, of course, verbs that take an object. Here are some other examples of transitive verbs. Please note that these verbs are not always used in transitive formulations. The verb smell, for example, could be transitive in "I can smell the grass," or it can be intransitive if it takes a complement rather than an object in, for example, "The grass smells good." Now, turning to sentence pattern 4, SVOO, the difference, of course, between this pattern and the previous one is that instead of just one object, there are 2. And importantly, both of these objects are necessary to complete the verb argument of this particular construction. This picture, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. I gave them cake. It's actually cake especially for cats, and the occasion happens to be Ruby's first birthday. So our tree diagram for this sentence has the same constituents we looked at previously, a sentence with a subject and a predicate. The subject has a noun phrase from which we can generate the particular lexical item I. And the predicate is expanded to include the auxiliary and the past tense. Now for the interesting part, our verb phrase. It consists of the following 3 child nodes. First, the verb give, to which we will attach the auxiliary tense marker. And then we have not one, but two noun phrases from which we generate our two objects. First, the indirect object, them, and secondly, the direct object, cake. So again, you'll note that both objects are generated from the verb phrase because they are both necessary to complete the verb argument. We cannot just say I gave or even I gave them. In order to create a fully formed sentence using this structure, we need two objects. I gave them cake. Now, this type of verb used in this pattern is called a ditransitive or double object verb. Not surprisingly, this construction has the core meaning of transfer or give. Other verbs that fall under this category are the following. Now, the next pattern, SVOC, we will look at is the fifth and final pattern of the Gobunke, the 5 basic sentence patterns that students of English study here in Japan. And as you can see, Hamish likes to play in the water, and not surprisingly, he got his paw wet. And that is the sentence that we will diagram for the SVOC pattern. You can see that, like the previous sentence pattern, there are two additional elements in the predicate, his paw and wet. However, there's only one object of the sentence. The adjective wet is what's called an object complement. That is, it provides more information about his paw. One simple way to differentiate a double object construction, which we looked at previously, from an object complement is to try inserting a be verb between the two elements. So in this case, his paw is wet. Makes perfect sense. However, in the previous example of the sentence pattern 4, I gave them cake, them or they would become they are cake, which clearly does not work. So let's now diagram the sentence. Here we have the same constituents as previous examples. Sentence is broken down into a subject and a predicate. The noun phrase in the subject is elaborated further to generate the pronoun he. And in the predicate, the auxiliary stores the past tense. Now, moving on to the verb phrase, we need to account for the verb get. As mentioned previously, there's just one object of the sentence, which is represented here as an NP. Now here actually is where it gets interesting. In this noun phrase, we have two obligatory elements that make it up. First, we have to account for his paw, which is another noun phrase. Secondly, we have an adjectival phrase, wet. So we need to first produce another noun phrase directly from a noun phrase. And you can see we have the possessive determiner his and the noun paw. Now, when generating one noun phrase directly from another, it's customary, at least in the grammar book, to mark the parent noun phrase with this accent symbol. So now we can account for the second obligatory component of the NP, the adjectival phrase, which consists of a single adjective, wet. Now, as mentioned previously, these object complements can be realized as adjectives or they can be realized as nouns. Let's take a look at what an object complement would look like that takes a noun rather than an adjective. Here we have the sentence, I made Hamish a samurai. This sentence is a rather unusual one, but it's a good one for our purposes because its structure is rather ambiguous. On the one hand, it could mean that I use my craft skills to create perhaps a samurai doll that I gave to Hamish, maybe for him to play with or to chew, but that would not be an SVOC pattern. That would be the previous construction, construction number 4, SVOO. A samurai would be the direct object and Hamish would be the indirect object. Or as a prepositional phrase, I made a samurai for Hamish. But again, that is not the meaning conveyed with the SVOC pattern. For a samurai to be an object complement, Hamish would actually have to have samurai as some kind of characteristic of him. In other words, he would actually have to become a samurai. So what would that look like? Oh, here we are. Now we have the SVOC meaning of the sentence, I made him a samurai. And we can use the same phrase structure rules that we applied previously to generate the subject and much of the predicate. So again, we have the same marked noun phrase because it is followed by another NP, but in this case, it's not one, but 2 noun phrases. Hamish and samurai. Together, these form a single small phrase, Hamish is a samurai. And so we have an example of the SVOC pattern. I should also mention that I got a bit carried away and I didn't just make Hamish a samurai, I also made Ruby samurai. So thanks both of you for your patience. So to recap, we have looked at 5 of the basic English sentence structure patterns. These are the 5 patterns or gobunke that are taught in Japanese schools to students of English. And as with the previous video, you can see I obtained permission from both Hamish and Ruby to use their photos. Thanks, guys. So let's now turn to the practice exercises. You can pause the video here before turning to the answer key. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.